guys? We are back. This is the Shillan and Duffy Show on the Sherdog Radio Network and the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. I am your host. I am Keith Shillan. I am joined, by the senior editor of Sherdog.com, Mr. Benjamin Duffy. Ben Duffy, UFC 253 just went down. How you feeling, man?
I'm feeling good, man. I got that little kind of just tingly feeling like after a card ends just on a couple of kind of shocking fights, not shocking because the outcome was that surprising in every case, but just high energy fights, finishes. Yeah, and I'm feeling it because we're talking half an hour after the fights ended.
Yeah. So let's get right into it. UFC 253 just went down in Yas Island in Abu Dhabi. We had two title fights on the line. The main event, we had Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa. In the co-main event, we had Dominick Reyes versus Jan Blachowicz. We'll get into those results in a second. But let's start right from the top. Israel Adesanya, Paulo Costa. On the round table, I believe me, you, and Jay Petrie, we all picked Israel Adesanya to win. I know I picked by a fifth-round knockout. What was your method? Do you remember?
Yes, I've got all of our picks in front of me.
Okay.
I picked fourth round, and Jay picked decision.
Okay, so we all had Adesanya. Me and you had a stoppage. Jay didn't, but we all were pretty confident pick. We all thought this was a good stylistic matchup. I don't think any of us saw us going like this. This is like all the great fighters of all time. Your John Jones, your Anderson Silvas, your Fedors. All these ones you've had matchups where you anticipate a matchup and then they put on one of these flawless, like, oh my God moments. Like I think of Anderson Silva. I think of his first Rich Franklin fight. You think of John Jones. I think of his first Daniel Cormier fight. Like these ones that this is supposed to be the toughest test to date, and then they just, you go back to Fedor, Mirko Cro Cop. Whatever one you want to do, you can do it for all. Demetrius Johnson, all the all-time greats. There's no way Israel Adesanya can top what he did tonight. This was a unbelievable performance. Right afterwards, I had a packed house. A bunch of friends came over, which is always bad for my note-taking because I do much better notes during the fight nights than I do during the pay-per-views because, all my friends want to come over and watch the fights. And I said, flawless victory. That was a Mortal Kombat flawless victory. What did you think of the overall performance? And then we'll get into the XLOs in a second, but what word comes to your mind when you think of what Israel Adesanya did tonight?
First word that comes out is the one that you threw out there, flawless. When you asked me how I was feeling at the very top of the show, what I said, stunning. I said seeing shocking or stunning. And it wasn't shocking or stunning that he won, but how he won. When you walk into the cage as a minus 180 favorite or whatever, you're expected to win. That you have to do more than just get your hand raised for people to say it was stunning. That was a stunning performance. We went into this in depth on the roundtable, but I expected Costa to give him some trouble early. And he just didn't. He didn't give him the slightest bit of trouble at any point in the fight. Adesanya was a little cautious at the beginning, but even there, I never even got to the point where I was like, okay, do something. He took a little bit of time, showing a little bit of respect for the power and speed of Costa. And then once he started turning it on, he was basically able to do whatever he wanted.
Yeah, I mean, it was incredible. So right before the main event kicked off, while they were still walking to the cage, my friend Robert, and he comes over for all the pay-per-views. I wouldn't call him a casual fan. I'd say he knows most of the guys. He might not watch every fight night, but he's very well versed. He definitely knows the pay-per-view main events, and he knew who Jan Blachowicz was and stuff like that. So he's knowledgeable. But he asked me, "What do you expect to happen?" I said, "Well, what do I expect to happen?" Well, I said my official prediction was Israel Adesanya by fifth round, but I don't expect anything. I'm picking Adesanya, but Costa could win, and I gave all these reasons why, and how I think this was such a tough matchup, and his fearlessness that he showed against Joe Romero, his willingness to just walk through shots, unload, relentless pressure, obviously his power, all this. That's not what happened. Before the fight, it was booked. It was previewed, or whatever you want to say, promoted as Adesanya's technical skills, his accuracy versus Romero's ferocity, his pure violence, his just brute strength, all this. I said on the round table, it's a sniper versus a tank. Mm-hmm. Well, the sniper won this time. The tank never even got to load it up because this fight was totally fought at the range Adesanya wanted. He dictated every moment, every exchange. I just was writing down, and I seem to do this a lot when Israel Adesanya fights, things that just jump out to me. And before I get to that list of things, because I'm sure you could probably come up with a list of things too, while you were talking a minute ago, I was thinking about the Robert Whittaker fight. And it's like, how could you go to Robert Whittaker, that was split about 50-50 where fans, where media members, where people, fighters, how people saw that fight. I don't think this fight was 50-50, but there was a big group of people that would go with Costa. Maybe it was 60-40, 65-35, whatever. How could he have topped what he did to Robert Whittaker? And then he did. It's like absolutely incredible. I'm floored by this guy.
Yeah, he's something else. That was one of the most dominant performances in recent memory in a fight with that stakes and with two fighters of that high a level in the cage against each other. And the funny thing is, this is the sixth title fight in UFC history between two undefeated fighters, and all six of them have been completely lopsided.
Really? I didn't know what the stat was, but yeah, that was...
Well, I mean, there was Machida versus Evans.
Uh-huh.
Then there were the four that Ronda Rousey had, and then there was tonight.
Wow. Yeah, that was absolutely incredible. Something that stood out to me was first, obviously, the kicks. Like, he went after the kicks. I thought the kicks was brilliant. It's a narrative I seem like we talk about every single event is these calf kicks. You have a guy that is known for his power, a guy who has his base, a guy who uses his legs so well to close the distance on you. That's the one thing we all talked about on the round table is not only the power of Costa, but was his accumulative. He attacks in high combinations. He comes in and he gets into his range. Well, take out his base, take out his power, take out where he doesn't want to step in that range, because when he steps in it, before he gets to that, before he gets 4 feet away, he's got to get 6 feet away. When he gets 6 feet away, you kick his leg. He can't get to 4 or 3 feet away. That really stood out to me. Obviously, the speed. We knew Adesanya was going to have a speed advantage. It seemed like he was on fast forward. Like the way he was moving, the range he kept, he was freezing him. Like he'd kick him and freeze him. Anything that Costa wanted to do, he was a little faint, little something, and Costa would just be frozen in time for a second, while Adesanya was already moving on to step, 2, 3, and 4, or plan B, C, and D. Costa was still frozen at plan A. And then also there was one time in the fight where Costa finally was able to close his distance and looked like, okay, now's your chance to unload, big hook, body punch, whatever. And as soon as he got into that range, and it was extremely brief, I think it was in the very beginning of the second round, it might have been at the very end of the first round, Israel Adesanya did something that to me was so intelligent. When he finally got into that range, Israel Adesanya went right to a plum clinch. He initiated a grappling exchange. It was very brief, and then he just circled off and got away. And it was like you had that position for 1 second, 2 seconds, and he was forced to defensive wrestle out of the clinch. Just perfect for Adesanya. Any things in the X's and O's really jump out to you?
Really, the only thing that really, again, the whole thing surprised me. It was a completely spectacular performance. But X's and O's wise, I actually expected Costa's kicks to maybe be a wrinkle that Adesanya would have to deal with. I think I said it on the round table. Costa throws really hard kicks to all levels. And when he really starts rolling downhill, when he has destroyed people in the past, it's when he starts using those to punctuate his punching combinations. I thought for someone like Adesanya, it might give him a little something to think about. But Adesanya had the perfect answer for it. He started kicking him first, kicking him hard, kicking his lead leg. And I'm not going to say it was everything because he clearly put a ton of game planning into this. but it was something that immediately made Costa gun shy to uncork any of his own offense. You mentioned it made him start pulling up instead of, charging in like he usually does. It certainly stifled Costa's own kicking. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
Almost before he did anything else offensively, Adesanya was hitting that leg.
Yeah. So we watched him do this and just absolutely systematically pick apart Costa with ease. He's been compared to Anderson Silva before, even his first fight in the UFC. Has there ever been a more accurate comparison of a guy heading into his, early stages of the UFC? Because we've had these crazy, Philippe Nova is the next George St. Pierre, and Phil Hawes is the next John Jones. Like, we've had all these crazy comparisons. Like, this is the one that stuck, and like that's what I'm feeling. Like, I'm feeling vintage prime Anderson Silva, where everything, like when I think about like the Forrest Griffin fight, where every punch he threw was just Forrest had no answer. Like, that's how I felt. Like Paulo Costa had a Forrest Griffin look to him tonight.
He totally did. And the funny thing is, Adesanya himself has kind of bristled in the past at the comparison. He's like, oh, you're just comparing us because we're two skinny black guys. I'm like, no, you're two skinny black guys that when you're on, you make other people that we think are very good strikers look completely amateur. And you like to dance.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just like the silhouette and the skin color. Like, they're the little granular X's and O's of their striking are not terribly similar, but just the way that they look to be on a completely different level than their contenders when they're firing on all cylinders is very reminiscent.
Yeah, definitely. So Anderson Silva, there's a kind of like a hierarchy of stars, and I'm not going to go through everybody and what stage they were on, but I think we can all agree. To me, there's like a holy trinity at the top. You got your Conor McGregor, your Ronda Rousey, and your Brock Lesnar. That's like the top level. Now, rank them how you want, but whatever. That's your top level.
Sure.
The next tier down, we've had those guys who definitely became stars. They had some huge moments, but just at the level before. It's some of the guys, and I might be forgetting people, guys. We're taping this at 1:38 a.m. right now, and I'm not even going off notes, so if I forget someone, don't at me. But George St. Pierre, John Jones, Chuck Liddell, Anderson Silva. I feel, Khabib Nurmagomedov might be in that position now, whatever. I feel like Adesanya is at least in that category right now. Like, he has it, man. A year ago, he beat Robert Whittaker just under a year ago. I'm looking at it right now. It was December 5th of last October 5th of last year, so just under a year ago. And I think I tweeted out something like Israel Adesanya definitely should be the next big star of the UFC. This is the guy the UFC should be when Nike calls, when Gatorade calls something, they want to do some kind of MMA thing. Don't go get Khabib. Don't go get Amanda Nunes. Go get Adesanya. Adesanya's the guy. Like, how could he not be?
Hey, he's the guy in the cover of the video game.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. I think of Anderson Silva, and you have Anderson Silva's skill set with a bigger personality, with the English speaking, and then also he is the face of MMA in two different regions. You have obviously where he was born, Africa, and then you also have the Australia, New Zealand area. So you have two areas of the world that claim him as their own, who's going to back him. You also have two areas in the world that, and no disrespect to Robert Whittaker, no disrespect to Kamaru Usman, but they haven't had the megastar. And it's also two areas in the world, and, Francis Ngannou, obviously with Africa too, but they also are two areas that are growing in popularity in MMA so well. To me, this Israel Adesanya's rise to star, it is the one that makes more sense than anybody in recent history.
Yeah, it completely does. He is a star just coming into his own at the right time, in the right place, from the right place. It's yeah, all the stars are kind of lining up there. And you're right, both Africa and specifically Nigeria. I mean, you could argue that it's kind of been the last year was kind of the year of Nigeria with
absolutely.
him and Usman and
Nagano.
Well, he's from Cameroon, but I'm thinking of the band.
Oh, Nigeria. I know. Actually, Nigeria.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Like just even specifically.
Sadiq Yusuf.
Yeah, Sadiq Yusuf coming up, and then obviously, all of a sudden we have multiple Australia, New Zealand, like Oceanic area champions in the UFC, where for the longest time you could name all the Australians and New Zealanders that had even been in the UFC on one hand.
That's right.
Yeah, it's a bit of a revolution out there, and he's the face of it in just about every way.
Yeah, absolutely incredible, and I just expect him. I mean, he's got the personality, the dancing. Like Dana White was asked about his dancing, and he says, he doesn't really, he's not care about it. Like, what are you doing, man? Like, you should be a personality, be big, be bold. Like, the people who don't like that stuff is not going to like him. That's okay, because they can still go cheer against him. And the people who do, they like the flash, they love all that. That coordinated dance with, when he did with his buddies before the Whitaker fight, I was just like, oh my God, think what this guy's doing right before a fight. And then winning it, it was like, are you kidding me?
And if you hated Adesanya and you saw that dance, you couldn't wait for him to get his ass kicked and just look like an idiot for like dancing out and then, getting knocked out. It didn't happen, but that's the kind of reaction it's going to get.
Sure. So he did two things after the fight that I'm for the showboat and I'm for the dancing and for that. I'm not crazy about taunting of an opponent. With that said, that can still be marketed. Like, you could be a little bit of a bad guy. So afterwards, I don't know if you saw this. I'm sure you did. He knocked out Paulo Costa. Paulo Costa was face down on the mat. He was kind of mounting him from behind. As soon as the referee pulled him off, I was going to say he made a sexual move. Listen, we're adults. He basically pretended to hump him.
Yep.
And then he went over to Eric Albatacine and started mouthing off to Paulo Costa's head coach. You just knocked out a guy on, pay-per-view. I don't know what the numbers are, but a lot of people just watch you beat this guy's ass. To me, that's a little too far. I mean, now he's not the first guy to do that. You had the Ronda Rousey not shaking Miesha Tate's hand. You had Tito Ortiz, the gravedigger. I think of the Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar was already a big star, but when he got up with the Frank Mir and smashed his head against the fence and was foaming from the mouth and the Bud Light crap and I stuck a horseshoe up your ass, whatever.
The very first fight Lesnar won in the UFC, he pretended he was riding Heath Herring like a Bronco.
I forgot about that.
I mean, when you take a professional wrestler and you put him in your cage, you're going to get a professional wrestler. But I completely agree. And the thing is, none of this detracts from Adesanya either as a fighter or as a star. I don't have to think he's classy.
That's right.
To say he might be the most dominant fighter in the sport right now. Like, it has nothing to do with it. But yeah, I mean, it's not a great look. I mean, in a perfect world, everyone would be classy and handshakes after their fist fight, but he isn't, and that's him. And it is a way in which he's very different from, say, Anderson Silva. Anderson Silva, really kept things buttoned down. He liked to be a showman, liked, big smiler and everything, and didn't generally like to let things get to him. Adesanya's got his heart on his sleeve. Like, he doesn't talk trash like a fighter. He talks trash like a gamer, and that's just what we've got. He's a new generation of fighter. He is quite a bit younger than me. He's closer to my kid's age than mine. So I'm going to be the old man just, with his hands on his hips saying, get off my lawn. You're supposed to shake hands after the game. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I really think about that. So
yeah. And I just think about what I thought about, I didn't care for it, but I think about, all the hundreds, possibly thousands of Buffalo Wild Wings, Arugas, Dave and Buster's, all these sports bar chains, and think about all the people packing it out, and the drunk people, and those who were cheering for Adesanya, and how many of those people were in that moment was dying laughing, or that's so great, huh? Like, so there was definitely a big portion that absolutely loved that. And I think you said it best. You don't have to be classy to be marketable. And I mean, he is an absolute superstar. To me, he needs to be the face of the UFC. I do know, and especially right after an event, I do know I live in the moment a lot. Like, I know that. I think that's what you do in a recap show. You kind of have to live in the moment. But I don't know. I can't see anybody else being the face of the organization right now. You said something that jumped out to me, and I wasn't planning on do this, and we definitely don't do this because both of us are part of the panelists that pick the Sherdog rankings. It's not voted on. It's just discussed, and we kind of go with a consensus. Right now, Israel Adesanya is 6th in the Sherdog rankings. Right above him is Kamaru Usman. His
overall pound-for-pound ranking.
Overall pound for pound. Yeah. Yes. Overall pound for pound. He's jumping Kamaru Usman, right?
That seems to be like the discussion's going on right now.
Yeah, and we'll jump into it tomorrow or later tonight. Yeah, and both me and you are very vocal on that. So he's probably jumping Kamaru Usman, right?
Of course. I mean, pound for pound rankings, you're talking about a bunch of fighters who, one, usually can't fight each other. I mean, it's very rare that two pound for pound guys are close enough in weight that they can. And two, you're talking about a bunch of fighters who, by definition, don't lose very often. Yeah. So for there to be any movement at all, the eyeball test has to count. Yeah. How you beat people and who you beat makes a difference. And this was a lot more impressive than Usman stifling Masvidal.
Yeah. Well, see, the reason I don't want to go through like all the way the list. Does he go over 5, 4? One, I don't want to give it away because we want people to click on the article when it comes out. But I mean, pound for pound is so. I mean, who would win, Henry Cejudo versus Israel Adesanya? Well, if is it at flyweight? Does Israel Adesanya have those 8-foot long arms? If he's a flyweight, or so obviously it's so. Subjective. But the reason why I wanted to bring this up, right now we have Jon Jones at number 2. Mm-hmm. It's been a long time since we've seen Jon Jones ever fall down a ranking. Khabib Nurmagomedov has finally passed Jon Jones. But the reason why I bring this up, there was it's really faded over time, especially with Jon Jones talking about going up to heavyweight. But it seemed like Jon Jones and Israel Adesanya was that like one dream match that kept getting brought up. But it was one of the one dream match where pretty much everyone laughed at like one side, like, come on, Israel, like you move to light heavyweight, Jon Jones is gonna smoke you. With Jon Jones looking human recently, and Israel Adesanya seeming like inhuman. And we all know that Jon Jones is much, much bigger, taller, longer reach, just bigger physique. He has to cut down to 205, where it seems like Adesanya doesn't even barely cut down to middleweight. Well, months ago, we would have laughed at it. Like, that line got extremely closer if that match happened, right?
Yeah. And I'm not going to get too caught up in the moment. If they fought 3 months from now, I would still heavily, heavily favor Jones. But just the way Jones has looked recently, where he doesn't have that safety valve anymore, where there is not a man on the planet that he cannot take down and elbow the shit out of his head. I mean, if he's stuck on the feet with Adesanya, I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah. No, I am with you. And one thing that always stood out with Jon Jones is that incredible chin he has. I know he's technically, I believe he's never been knocked down in a fight, though I think most people believe that should not be the case, as Dominick Reyes did knock him down. But yeah, it's just one of those ones. Like I want to, I like those future lines, and they put up like fights like I'm sure there'll be a future line of Jon Jones and Adesanya. I wish I looked before tonight and see what the line was, and then see what it's afterwards, because the gap has definitely closed, and Israel Adesanya looked amazing. So let's get into some matchmaking. We didn't really talk about Costa too much, because we've kind of been in awe of Israel Adesanya. Let's start with him. Obviously, this is a very tough loss. The road back, when you get not just losing the champion, but to lose the way you are, there's not going to be too many people really, arguing for you to get a rematch. One thing that really stood out about Costa was the undefeated. Well, he's not undefeated anymore, so that kind of draws away from him. So your UFC matchmaker, he comes back to Jorgen Braun. Who would you match Paulo Costa with next?
It's tough. Even though he hasn't been in the UFC that long, he has fought a lot of the people kind of beneath him in the rankings, and the others that are even kind of fringe up-and-comers are not ready. I mean, I'm going to answer your next question too, because I really think they should probably just take the Cannonier-Whittaker fight, give the winner a title shot, give the loser to Costa.
Yeah, I actually thought about that. I think that's the obvious answer, and I don't mean that in an insulting way. I mean, like, that's what most people are going to say, and there's a lot of logic behind it. The issue I'm having is with Adesanya looking so dominant, and he's already taken out like 3 of the top guys. And it's not the deepest division, and we're gonna start getting guys coming in for the second. Kind of the issues we had with Anderson Silva, kind of the issues we've had with any of these long-reigning champions. And I know Israel Adesanya is not a long-reigning champion, but he's starting to rack up some victories. I don't want Costa to fight somebody who may be a contender, and I don't want Costa to knock that guy out. Like, I don't mean knock him out like TKO. I mean, like, knock him out of the running. So I decided to match him with someone that Adesanya has already ran through, and I think Derek Brunson would be fun. The wildness style of Derek Brunson with the kind of wild style of Costa, that's the fight I would do. That said, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that Costa moves up to light heavyweight. We know that he cuts weight. When you just lost to the champion and there's a long road, there might be a much shorter road to the new champion, Jan Blachowicz. So if that is the case, I wouldn't mind him facing the winner of Oestermeyer versus Nikita Krylov. Volkan Oestermeyer and Nikita Krylov. If
he moves up to light heavyweight, that would be the perfect matchup for him. Because the winner of Oestermeyer and Krylov, they're not going to be next in line at 205, and I know we're going there next. So that'd be a perfect match for them. Because, one, that's a great scalp for one of them if they beat Costa. If Costa beats them, then all of a sudden he is a problem in a whole new division. I like that.
Yeah, and I actually like Costa, the idea of Costa at 205, just from, like I just said, he cut so much weight. But one of the things we saw him in the Romero fight is really slow down in the third round. If he has the extra water in him, we know he's got the physique. I mean, he looks like a heavyweight. He would not be undersized. He'd actually probably be even bigger at light heavyweight, a little faster. I'd actually think that'd be a good move for him. Adesanya, you already said the winner of Cannonier versus Robert Whittaker. I'm going to do one of those, like, 1 and 1A. To me, and unfortunately, this is the situation the UFC is in. That's why I didn't like the idea of Cannonier versus Robert Whittaker. Like, I think Robert Whittaker could win that fight, and you're in a really tough sell. You're going to have a hard time selling Robert Whittaker versus Adesanya. When it wasn't, at that time, it'd be, maybe a year and a half by the time they can fight again. And it was so one-sided, I think that'd be a hard sell. So if Cannonier beats Robert Whittaker, that's the no-brainer. Mm-hmm. So if Robert Whittaker beats Cannonier, you might have to do the winner of Jack Hermanson versus Darren Till.
And, I mean, Hermanson and Till aren't fighting until December, so I don't know how Adesanya feels about maybe 6 months on the shelf.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. It really is. You're right. That's a very good point. I'll give you that. That's we might not have choice. It might have to be Robert Whittaker. But the other thing, when you get to Robert Whittaker, and I hate to kind of do this, I hate throwing, like, salt in the wound, but he's a guy who gets wounds often, so, it might be tough for him to turn back around as he's had some of the worst luck, for a fighter in history. Anything else you want to say about the main event as we move on?
Nope. Congratulations, Israel Adesanya.
Yeah. So we picked that one right. We picked the co-main event wrong. I said that Dominick Reyes, I believe, that was much better than Jan Blachowicz, that he would run right through Jan Blachowicz. Well, I was absolutely so utterly. This is one of those ones that's going to, like, put the pie right in my face. I wasn't even close. Jan Blachowicz looked sensational tonight. He won by second round TKO. He is now the undisputed light heavyweight champion of the world after Jon Jones gave up the belt. Man, before we get to the X and O's, I just want to say this, and again, I might be living in the moment. I go back to, I said it on the breakdown, on the roundtable, UFC 210. I was in Buffalo, New York. I saw him fight Patrick Cummins and just get absolutely worked over by C level fighter. If you told me at that time that he would go on the run that he had from then on, I wouldn't have believed you. If you told me he was going to hold the UFC title, I mean, the UFC title was on the line that night. Daniel Cormier versus Anthony Rumble Johnson. If you told me that one day Jan Blachowicz would be the lightweight champion of the world, I would have said you're insane. What do you think of this turnaround of Jan Blachowicz? And what do you credit most for it?
I credit really whatever changes he has made to his strength and conditioning regimen. He is a physically stronger, just quicker and more coordinated. And athleticism is something you have on a certain level, just genetically. You can improve what you have, but you can't add what's not there. But he has maximized whatever he has, and most significantly, gas is not a problem for him anymore. I am struggling to think of many fighters who made more of a complete reworking of their game in their mid-30s than Jan Blachowicz.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. I also think we probably should give a lot of credit to his team. You mentioned obviously his weight training. I'm sure he's working with some I haven't followed enough, but he probably has some kind of coach in the weight training. We talked about his takedown defense improving, and I think you made a really good point that we have not stressed that. Not necessarily, we always think of cardio as something about fading late in the fight. It's also about sustaining power early throughout the fight. That's definitely something we saw. When I started watching this fight in the very early, midway through the first round, I think I said, man, Dominick Reyes, he went after Jon Jones, and he's not going after. He was hesitating, and then about 10 seconds later, I had this epiphany. I'm like, well, duh, he is, because he's getting hurt. That's why he's hesitating, because we talked on the roundtable about Reyes being this sensational athlete, so explosive, so fast. Well, strength is the ultimate equalizer, and I think that is the thing. That's the one era that Blachowicz had it's just that pure brute strength, and I felt like he hurt Reyes early. Obviously, we saw those kicks, the huge welt he had, and which is oh god, that was so painful to see. It's one of those ones when you start seeing that build up, you start saying why do I like this sport? Am I a bad person? Am I a bad person that I like watching two men brutalize each other's bodies for my liking?
No, he bullied him. He bullied a visibly larger man who, I have no idea how much each of those guys cuts, but my guess would be that Reyes weighed more walking into the cage, and Blachowicz just bullied him. I did not expect his kicks to be that effective. Oh.
Yeah, if obviously we both got this one wrong, we both picked Reyes, but if someone told you ahead of time that one of these guys was going to really hurt the other guy with kicks, especially body kicks, we would have thought Reyes all day. Yeah, that's his game. His game is the kicks. We saw it, bother Jon Jones. We saw it bother Ovince St. Preux. We've seen that part of his game. Blachowicz, to me, I thought he's got some power punches, but I had the worst take on this fight. I was so off. In the second round, it seemed like Reyes was starting to come back, and I said okay, this is what I'm expecting now. Okay, he had a little flurry, but he was starting to find his range. He started finding his rhythm, his timing, and he looked like he started getting comfortable, and it seemed like his confidence was building. And as soon as I started saying that to the room of people that I was with, then Blachowicz just ended it with that little short left, that little compact short left hook. Reyes never recovered, and Blachowicz followed him up, TKO. Did you notice what I saw there?
Yes, and it reminded me of just some other kind of brutal. Like when one striker brutalizes another striker that I thought of as being more or less on the same level, like to go a little old school, like Vanderlei Silva versus Crow Cup. You see the difference between a guy who throws straight punches and a guy that wings stuff. Frank Muir versus Todd Duffy, where Duffy just had these huge, ridiculous, wide hooks, and Muir, I mean, he's not the straightest puncher, but he had the shorter distance between 2 points and just caught Duffy way overextended, just right on the jaw. Here it felt like that, only it was on the nose.
Yeah,
because Reyes' nose was toast.
Oh yeah. So thing about Blachowicz that really impressed me is not so much his speed, because he's not that fast. He's not. We already talked about he's not that athletic. But what I love about him is he keeps his legs with him, and what I mean by that is when he throws the hooks, he stays in tight. So he's generating all his power because he's stepping in on the hook, or he's throwing it in close where he's able to turn his hips on it, and that was the punch that took out Dominick Reyes. Absolutely sensational. I've been sleeping on Jan. I remember I picked him over Corey Anderson. But other than that, the rest of his run, I was not giving this guy the respect he deserved. This fight, I thought he was getting blown out. There was, I think I don't remember, but I might have took Luke Rockhold over him. This, and it's just one of these ones. It's I'm not speaking for both of us. I'll just speak for me. I gotta start respecting this guy. I mean, he's the champion.
Yep, it's time to start rethinking. Time to start rethinking our whole idea of Jan Blachowicz. Yeah,
so me and my friends would like to do a little trivia and this and that, and when Jan Blachowicz, it said 13th fighter to win the undisputed UFC light heavyweight title, and I asked my friend Dave, Dave, how many think you can name off the top of your head? And he's like, maybe 13 of the 13, maybe 7 or 8. He goes, how many do you think? I said, I'll do all 13. And then I started naming Frank Shamrock all the way on. I went down the order, who beat who, and as I'm naming them, I'm just like, look at the names that are on this list: Frank Shamrock, Tito Ortiz, Quentin Jackson, Chuck Liddell, Randy Couture, all the way down the list. John Jones, Daniel Cormier, whatever. And it's always been that glory division, but he's the one name that just does not fit.
That's absolutely true.
And I'm like, I was like, the UFC wanted Dominick Reyes to win, right?
I think they were probably, yeah. I mean, the UFC does a good job of reacting well when things don't go the way they expected. Usually, they rally behind it, but I'm sure that they were ready to push the button on the posters.
Yeah.
for
Yeah. And I want to say this just for the record. Don't hear me wrong. When I say the UFC wanted to win, I'm not saying that they're moping, that Dana White is saying it's so terrible, but it's more like when you have the promotion team come in, it's easier to promote Dominick Reyes. That's what I mean by it.
It's a little easier harder to promote Dominick Reyes, but believe me, the UFC is never going to be upset at having a champion from continental Europe.
Yeah, that's a good point.
When COVID is not happening, they want to put on, anywhere between, 5 and 8 shows a year in Europe. They like having someone they can put on top of these cards other than Alexander Gustafsson and Michael Bisping, so they'll be happy.
Yeah,
they'll be fine.
And I'm trying to think. Do we have? So we have Khabib, the Eastern European, but do we have another Western European champion? Off the top of my head, no, we don't, right?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, I think the last. We had Joanna Jędrzejczyk, obviously. We had Conor McGregor and Michael Bisping, but yeah, we don't have one. So who would have thought? I don't remember which one was the last one to hold the title. Maybe it was Conor. Maybe it was Joanna. I think it was Joanna. Who would have thought that after Joanna lost the title, that the next champion from Europe would be Jan Blachowicz? How crazy is this?
You want to hear something crazy?
Sure.
Here, I'm gonna give you a rundown here. You just talked about the Blachowicz versus Cummins fight, okay?
Yeah.
Where he lost to Cummins. It was a miserable fight.
I think I know what you're gonna say. I know you're gonna say, but go ahead.
Okay, here are the fights since then. Devin Clark. Blachowicz was the underdog.
Oh my God.
Manawa. Blachowicz was the underdog. Nikita Krylov, Blachowicz was the underdog. Thiago Santos, he was the underdog, rightly so.
Yeah.
Rockhold, he was a 2-1 underdog, over 2-1, plus 225. He was a slight favorite over Jacare. Then he was a 2-1 underdog to Corey Anderson and a 2-1 underdog to Dominick Reyes.
Oh my god! So
over that stretch where he was an underdog like 7 out of 9 times, he's 8-1.
Yeah. So you said it was Jacare. What was the other one that he was the favorite? I don't think there was another.
Jacare and
I don't think there was another one. So out of 9 fights, 8 of them he was the underdog.
Yeah. Sorry.
And think about this: the one fight he was just a slight favorite was maybe besides the loss to Thiago Santos was probably his worst performance.
Mm-hmm.
That's not where I thought you were going to go with this, but that is absolutely sensational.
Just so that you know that you're not the only one who needs to kind of rethink his whole narrative about Jan Blachowicz, because Vegas has been dead wrong about this man for like 2 years now.
Yeah, but I actually think this needs to be the narrative. Like, this needs to be the promotion. He needs to be the Cinderella. They need to. That's the angle they need to go. They need him to be like whoever he faces next. And if it's Thiago Santos, he probably is going to be the underdog again. Like, that's what they need to do. Like, I'm always like, no one believes in me. Like, they need to do that. He needs to. He needs to take on that situation. Like I remember Bill Belichick was the king of that. Like, no one gives respect. Like, what, dude? You're like. You're a 4-point favorite in the like, what do you mean no one gives you respect? And I remember Tom Brady would do that thing, like, it's Tom Brady's like, no, no one was picking us. It's like, and you mean like for the first time in like 15 years you went to like number 1 ranked guy in team in Vegas to win the Super Bowl? Yeah, like, he needs to do that, like, try to use this for it. Speaking of underdogs, we didn't do. I'm sorry, we didn't do matchmaking. I was so ready to get to an underdog. I saw the little like segue and I jumped at it. You want to do Blachowicz? Or you want to do Reyes? Blachowicz is easy. It's like a tournament. It's the winner of Santos and Teixeira, right? Yeah. Okay. We both agree.
It works out. Actually, it works out beautiful either way. If Santos wins, that's great for me, because honestly, if a new person wins the title, I think somebody that has a recent definitive victory over them should do a little bit of being able to jump the line.
Absolutely. I totally agree. If it makes sense. If it makes, we're not saying
it makes sense.
Yeah, we're not saying if Stefan Struve beats Tai Tuivasa, okay, he gets the title. Yeah. We're not going extreme, but yeah, if you're someone in that range, top 3, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, like if Curtis Blades ever wins the UFC title, Ngannou is going to be jumping some lines.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example of this, and I keep saying this to people when people are saying, like, right now there isn't a guy like jumping out to fight Alex Volkanovski. There's like 4 or 5 guys, and one person, people, obviously he's fighting Brian Ortega, but the Korean Zombie. Everyone's saying, well, the Korean Zombie should be next, and I'm like, Yair Rodriguez beat him, and Yair Rodriguez, I mean, he was losing the whole fight, and he got it with 1 second left, but he still has a win over him. Like, if he's in the group, then it's got to, like, if you want to go Zabit, you want to go Brian Ortega, you want to go somebody else out of the group. But with the win over one of the guys in the group, that guy, like, the Korean Zombie's out of the group. You know what I mean? Like, as long as Yair is in the group, Korean Zombie's out of the group. I think that'd be a really good storyline. I also think if Glover Teixeira wins, you got another.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
And that makes him 40 years old on a 5-fight winning streak with no smoke or mirrors. There are no junk decisions there. There are no bad fighters there. He has beat 5 very good UFC light heavyweights in a row, and improbably he is fighting the best he's ever fought at age 40.
Yeah. I think would be really fun. So I love I don't know if I said this around tape. I think I was planning on saying it. I don't know if I said it. I said I picked Reyes, but I wouldn't have mind seeing Blachowicz win, because I love that journeyman who worked his way, never gave up, kept working through, wins the title. I feel the same way. While Glover Teixeira was never looked at as a journeyman, he was always looked at as very good, couldn't get over the hump. And I'm going to go on record, like, I don't think he's going to beat Thiago Santos. I don't think if he wins him, he'll win Jan Blachowicz, beat Jan Blachowicz. But what an incredible story that would be. So we both in agreement that I kind of like it. I kind of like the Santos Teixeira matchup now, and even more. Dominick Reyes, obviously, he's on a 2-fight losing streak now. I'm going to go with Johnny Walker. I feel like he's kind of back in the list. I don't want him to take out guys who are coming up. So I'm going to go with Johnny Walker. Who would you match Dominick Reyes with next?
I'd be fine with Johnny Walker, although I maybe I'm just a hater, but I don't think Johnny Walker did anything last week to indicate that his problems are solved.
Yeah. Yeah, I want it as a rebound win for Reyes more than anything.
I mean, otherwise, if Teixeira loses, I'm fine with Reyes versus Teixeira. I don't know how much longer we're going to have Teixeira.
Sure. Uh-huh.
So it kind of depends on what he wants to do.
Yeah.
If he loses to Santos and he knows, okay, I'm going to need, with the kind of line that's starting to line up here, I'm probably going to need to win 2 more before I get another title shot. I don't know what he's going to want to do. So.
Yeah, and this is a guy, he has his own team and all that, so who knows. Before the 2 title fights, we had 2 flyweights fighting on the main card. We had Kai Kara France versus Brandon Royval. It was not a good night for one of the City Kickboxing fighter, as Brandon Royval pulled up an upset, winning by second round submission. One thing I think all 3 of us on the roundtable said was we expect early success from Royval. And we said Kai Kara France is going to have to probably endure a half a round, maybe a full round, onslaught from Brandon Royval. No, he had to endure a round and a half onslaught because Brandon Royval looked amazing tonight. On the feet, he was. Kai Kara France was having a similar thing with Costa. He was getting froze by the range. He did a lot of admiring what Brandon Royval was doing, and by admiring I mean getting kicked in the face. And when any of the grappling got initiated, Brandon Royval was tremendous. Submission, changed the submission to submission. He finally, I believe it was a guillotine that he put Kai Kara France out, causing a tap. That's 2 wins in the division. I know the City Kickboxing thing, those 4 fighters, there's definitely a lot of momentum with that. It's a hot team. I don't think the UFC would have minded Kai Kara France winning. There's definitely the way to market that. But this is great for the flyweight division. You have new blood. You have a guy coming off an incredible win over, a ranked fighter in Kai Kara France. This is so good for the flyweight division. Am I right or am I wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. Royval just has a ton of energy and charisma that just kind of pours off him. And every division needs that. Every division would be better off and more interesting if it had a champ who was exciting in the cage and charismatic outside of it, but flyweight especially. And this guy he's dynamite. He's so much fun to watch. Has been since his LFA days. And he's not an unbeatable guy. I could see him, being a top 5 guy, maybe making it to a title shot at some point, but he's going to take some L's along the way. So it definitely helps that he's a flyweight that people are going to remember.
Yeah, so besides the undefeated part, and I don't know if he's as high of a prospect, he does have a Brian Ortega rise feel to when Brian Ortega was coming up the featherweight division. It was that never make one mistake in this guy because his grappling is so sensational. He can put you out. I feel the same way right now about Brandon Royval, where, like I said, I don't know if he's going to make it all the way to a title fight or whatever, but he has that excitement there where, there was moments where Kai Kara France was, escaped, submissions, was on top, and he was just he said, I'm going to step back and fix my shorts instead of jumping on you because I don't want anything to do with the ground with you. And to me, that's really exciting for the division.
I was surprised by the size difference between the 2 of them.
Yeah.
I was not expecting Royval to come out and look 3 inches taller and just bigger.
Yeah.
So, just that's a little kind of note that I put in the back of my head about halfway through the first round. Yeah,
Royval is definitely long and lengthy, and then Kai Kara France is short, compact kind of guy, so I think it might have expanded out a little bit. But yeah, really good for the division. Moving on, we had two other ranked bantamweights in a fight that really matters in the shallow division, and that was between Caitlyn Vera and Sajara Eubanks. Caitlyn Vera, the Brazilian, won a unanimous decision. No disputing this one. I thought Sajara Eubanks looked as good as she could have in this matchup. It was one of those ones where she needs to get on the right program and weight cutting program and be at flyweight, because she's just too small, especially for the big girls in the division. When you have a girl like Caitlyn Vera, who's really big for bantamweight, grappling is such a big part of Eubanks' game, and when she couldn't really use it or really couldn't use it effectively, like her window of winning, giving the size, discrepancies that she was giving up, size disadvantage she was giving up, was so small, and she could overcome that. What did you think of this fight?
I am not big on moral victories, and most fighters that I've ever spoken to aren't either. But if it's possible to raise your stock in a loss, I thought Eubanks did here. I thought she looked better than I expected her to. If you told me going in that she would lose the fight, but she would win the last round, I would say that's a good sign there, because I expected her gas tank to betray her just on account of a second cut in 2 weeks. But no, like, she fought a smart game plan. The thing she tried to do did not necessarily work, but in each situation, she was pursuing the tactics that gave her the best chance of winning the fight, and Vieira was just bigger, better, fresher. I would have favored Vieira even after a normal fight at bantamweight, after full camps. In fact, I think I said this on the roundtable. So yeah, I thought Eubanks looked good. I agree. Her best move would be to just really revamp her whole conditioning thing and see if she can find a happy, healthy way to make 125. But I think 2 years from now, Caitlyn Vieira is going to be a contender, if not possibly the champ in this division, and this fight is going to look pretty good on Eubanks' resume. Hey, remember that time that Eubanks stepped in on 2 weeks' notice and gave Vieira all she could handle for 3 rounds? I think it'll probably look pretty good in hindsight.
Yeah, I agree. I think there was definitely moments where she looked good. I think you wrapped this up really well. Before that, the fight that kicked off the pay-per-view was, the closest fight of the night, at least the most highly contested. We had Sajara Tukhugov taking on Hakeem Dawodu. Hakeem Dawodu picked up a victory by split decision. A lot of people were split on this on Twitter, what they thought. I gave it to Tukhugov, and I gave the first 2 rounds to Tukhugov, the third round to Dawodu. In my opinion, I don't think Dawodu did enough to get a 10-8 round. I may not give 10-8 rounds out enough as I should. I might still have a little old school mentality. I know we're supposed to say if it's decisive, it's supposed to be a 10-8 round. I don't think it was decisive enough. But I do realize that might be a little flaw because I don't give them that often. That said, I gave it to Tukhugov. How did you score it?
I gave it to Tukhugov. I gave him the first and second. I gave Dawodu the third. 10-9 rounds all around. So for me, close but straightforward 29-28 for the Russian. All
right, so I'm looking at MMA decisions. This was by no means a robbery. Like, I don't think either one of us is saying that. It was close. Obviously, we break down I always like to go to MMA decisions because you have independent media. Obviously, 23 scorecards does not speak for the masses. I think it does a pretty well job to get an idea. On MMA decisions, there was 13 for agreeing with us with Tukhugov. That said, I was one of the 13 on that website, so maybe if you want to call it 12. 12 for them, 7 for Dawodu, with 3, all 3 being the Sure Dog play-by-play scorers, Jay Petrie, Tristan Critchfield, and Brian Knapp. They were the 3 draws given. I'm assuming there was first and second round for Tukhugov and a 10-8 round for Dawodu. Tukhugov, it seemed like he thought he was winning because he really slowed down in the third round, kind of was on his bike a lot, kind of running away from Dawodu. And in hindsight, that cost him the fight.
Yep. Yeah, it did. And yeah, he didn't give much at all. He didn't show much at all. And I don't know what it is. He missed weight by 5 pounds, so there might be some nagging injury somewhere. He might be fighting off some illness. I have no idea. But yeah, that was a miserable round.
Yeah. So now Dorado is on a 5-fight winning streak. Both of us scored against him, so I don't think either one of us are going to be thinking this guy's going to really rise up in the division. That said, you can't ignore a 5-fight winning streak in the UFC. What do you see from this guy? Do you see he was very fired up after the fight? He wants a top 15 fighter or a top 10 fighter. He thinks he deserves it. Do you see him as in that range, or could beat those guys?
I don't know if he's in that range right now, but despite he's 29. He hasn't had as many fights as a lot of 29-year-old prospects would by this point in their career. I would certainly like to see him against kind of the 9 through 15 people in the featherweight division. I think he's, like I say, I don't know if he's a future top 10 guy himself or a future title contender, but he's done enough that I would like to see him against a fringe contender. I'd love to see him take on Shane Burgos, Jeremy Stevens, Arnold Allen type guy. Yeah,
I agree. I think he at least deserved that. I thought the winner of this matchup deserved something like that. I'm still a little concerned. I think he gets off to a slow start. Like the first round, if he turned it up a little bit, he might have been able to take that first round. But he obviously did enough to get the decision. We said, me, you, and Jay Petrie on the round table, that there'd be a city kickboxing fighter that would have to overcome an early storm and kind of rally around second and third round. We were correct about that. We were just wrong about the person. We all thought it was Kai Kara France. No, it was actually Brad Riddell who I was like, I'll admit, I was the guy saying that this is I wasn't saying I was talking highly of Alex de Silva. Like, I liked his skills. I just thought Brad Riddell was better everywhere. And he was not better in the first round. Like, he almost got submitted. I mean, was kind of getting pieced up on the feet, taken down. And then second and third round, it seemed like he got really comfortable and started picking him apart. I'm still high on Riddell. I just feel like this was just one of those ones where he kind of got stuck in the mud a little bit, just got off to a slow start and had to really play catch up. I was still very impressed in the second, third round. Are you still with me? You seem like on the round table you're kind of a believer in Riddell too. Are you with me that this was just a slow start, or is this something to be concerned? Or maybe we just really underrated Alex de Silva. So it's kind of three. You have 3 options.
I might have slightly underrated Alex de Silva. There's definitely some smoke and mirrors in his record, but maybe they're not quite as egregious as I thought. One of the things that I expected to be a factor was I expected Riddell was going to be a substantially just physically stronger guy once they got their hands on each other. So when de Silva was on his back on the first and just kind of soundly out grappling him and was able to get him on the ground, period, I was like, maybe I had this wrong. But by the third round, Riddell was turning away the takedowns pretty easily, just shucking him off almost like Crow Cop style, just 2 underhooks and just shove him away. And that looked like more like what I expected from him. So yeah, I'm still a believer in Brad Riddell. This was his 10th fight in his entire MMA career. Obviously, he'd been a kickboxer before, but it's only his 10th MMA fight against a much more experienced prospect. Yeah, he lost the first round and made some adjustments in between. His cardio, stood him in good stead, as did his corner. And if he keeps winning fights, we won't even look at this as a speed bump.
Yeah, I think that was a good point about the experience. I also think that he might have looked past him a little bit. He beat a higher touted prospect in his last fight. De Silva wasn't as highly as thought of. It might have been something where he just kind of looked past him. I'm still high on him. And this was the prelim headlining fight. Speaking of headlining, a guy who has headlined many UFCs, that's Diego Sanchez. He took on Jake Matthews, where he was brutally beaten by Jake Matthews as pretty much everybody other than Diego Sanchez thought would happen. Diego looked really fat to me. Like he looked.
Yeah, that was a different physical Diego Sanchez than we've ever seen. That like substantially different even than his last appearance or two. So yeah, that was surprising to me. But yeah, I mean, what else is there to say about it? He got physically dominated by Jake Matthews, and I don't know if that would have been different if he were in better shape. But it didn't help. Didn't help the eyeball test.
Yeah. I don't think it would have mattered if Diego was in better shape. But I would kind of wish Diego won, so we could have got like a post-fight interview. Someone could have asked him about like his new like gut, and just see he'd find out that he found some new zen, and the chemicals in the air from the forces of nature was telling him that the dad bod is the new healthy look and something. I would have loved to hear why he was so out of shape. As far as I know, Stephan Bonner is now 0-1 as a head coach. I don't know if he's head coach to anybody else, but
oh man.
Still, it was tough watching. I mean, to me, I didn't learn anything about Matthews. The only thing I'd say, I guess he didn't fold under the pressure of facing a big name. I'll give him credit for that. It was tough watching Diego laying on his back, face all bladed up, and just a pool of blood building up underneath his head. Like I think Diego showed enough to show that he's still UFC level, very low level, but still probably UFC level. If he went to a regional scene, I think he'd still do pretty well. That said, like, this is beyond him now, man. Like you're a legend. You're going to the UFC Hall of Fame. You shouldn't be buried on prelims. Like they're not even the prelim headline anymore. It's like, he's got to retire. Like just come on.
I certainly agree that it would be a great idea. He took a lot of damage in this fight. He took a lot of damage from a guy that, I mean, he's a pretty promising fighter, but Jake Matthews is just another welterweight.
Yeah, I think of it's kind of like when you go to like mini camp and there's like a former all-pro wide receiver who, kind of lost a step and, they're battling to make the roster and they probably could take the fifth wide receiver spot. They're probably better than the fifth guy, but at this point, do you want to have Torrey Holt playing 5 snaps a game? Like, no, so they just kind of let him like retire instead. Like that's how I feel like Diego. Like Diego has enough skills to be better than the very lowest level welterweights or lightweight if he wants to fight at that. But it's just below you at this point. Like,
and very much like, say, Torrey Holt, Diego Sanchez makes a lot more money than the person they would replace him with.
Yeah, that's a very good point too. Yeah. Speaking of not making a lot of money and speaking of lightweights, Ludovic Klein lost 30% of his purse because he thought he was a lightweight and missed the featherweight limit by 4 pounds. That said, he made his UFC debut, took on Shane Young, the first of 4 representatives for City Kickboxing, who the team went 2-2 on the evening. Ludovic Klein knocked out Shane Young in a really impressive performance in the first round. I didn't know much about Klein before tape study, but it's one of those ones, like every film I watched on him, I'm like, oh, this guy's pretty good. And then I was like, wow, this guy's really good. I was like, oh, no, this guy's going to beat Shane Young. To, oh, yeah, no, he's going to knock Shane Young out. Like, wow. To, like, the next one film was like, wow, this guy's really good. Like, this is an exciting person to add to the UFC roster. His high kick was the talk of what everybody who's seen him saying, and he absolutely delivered with a high kick. Obviously, missing weight does not look good, but his performance was great. What do you think of Klein?
I was impressed. Obviously, all the talk is about the head kick. The highlight reel, heavily features the head kick. But kind of like Crow Cop in that regard, it almost hides the fact that he throws nice straight punches and throws them in combination. And throwing straight punches in combination sounds like a simple thing, but it's one of the most lacking skill sets in mixed martial arts striking. So always nice to see. It is marred by the fact that he missed weight badly. I mean, it's worth noting that Israel Adesanya had more shit to talk about Ludovic Klein than he did about Paulo Costa. Yeah. Like he had Dana White by the collar, just like yelling in his face about how, about Klein after the main event. Like that was clearly on Adesanya's mind. And I do kind of feel it, but at the same time, I think he would have dusted Shane Young at any weight. So I don't, because the thing is, Klein has fought at 45 as well as 55. And on the scales, he looked like a lightweight, trying to make 145 on short notice. I don't know if his management tried to tell the UFC he may not be able to make 145. Could we do a catch weight? Could we do lightweight? Because certainly the UFC has done plenty of that this year. Or if they just wanted so badly to make sure he got that shot that they're like, oh yeah, he's 151 right now. He, healthy shit, and he'll be at the limit. I don't know what the case was, but it's a shame that it detracts from it, because I think he would have buried Shane Young, if they did a 150-pound catch weight or whatever.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, he looks really good. He looks way ahead of Shane Young. You mentioned about Israel Adesanya. Right after the match, he basically cornered Dana White and was kind of yelling at him about the amount of money he was taking. He jumped on the mic afterward and talked about, the 30% purse getting taken away when you miss weight. It should be 90%. People make weight. I don't think this is something that is. Listen, I shouldn't say this. Like, I'm not calling the guy a liar, but I don't think he's that passionate about guys missing weight and how much money is taken away. I think this is more that Israel Adesanya is such a good teammate, and he loves his teammates so much. I mean, like, you think about when he won, he called it. He thanked all his coaches. He was shouting out all his teammates who fought that night, but then he went on further to all his teammates back home. Just kind of shows the kind of guy he is and how much he loves his team. And I feel like this was his way of kind of consoling Shane Young a little bit, kind of like, it's not your fault. This guy, if this guy cut another 4 pounds, was sucked out like you probably win. That said, 90% is obviously too extreme. But I've always thought that weight cutting should be like, you miss by any weight, it should be a certain price, and then almost like a speeding ticket where each pound it goes up and up and up, where you might get 90 if the opponent says, yeah, the guy missed by 7 pounds. Yeah, that's 90% of his purse. Do you want to? You got to give it to the guy who missed weight. You want to fight on only 20% of your purse, 10%, whatever the percentage, 10% of your purse, and then I will. And then you want to throw it to the other opponent. Hey, he's got to give up 90%. Do you want to fight a guy who weighs 8 pounds over the limit?
I mean, my problem with it is that by the time you get to the weigh-ins, everybody has that, show must go on mentality. Obviously, the guy that's missing weight is just like, oh, I hope the fight doesn't get scratched. Of course I'll fight for 70% of my purse, But even the fighter that made weight, if you took any of these fighters that, they made weight and their opponent missed weight, and you tell them, you can have your show money and go home, or you can fight, they're all going to want to fight, because they've worked their way up to this for 3 months. It's been the focus of all their training and preparation. All they want at that point is to get in that cage and do what they came here to do. So the fact that they get 10, 20, 30% of their opponent's purse is just a cherry on the sundae.
Yeah.
Like, even if that money was taken away and just given to a charity or something, and the fighter who made weight was just making their regular purse, they'd still want to fight. All they want is to fight.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be in their hands. They can't make a reasonable decision at that point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I definitely think there should be something with the win bonuses. Like, I don't know if it's the fighter should automatically get his win bonus even if he loses, or maybe the fighter who misses weight forfeits his win bonus and that additional money. Like, it could be 20%, and your win bonus automatically goes. If you win, you don't get that. Actually 50K, actually 60K, whatever your contract, that goes to your opponent no matter what. win or lose, that guy gets that win bonus because the win bonus gets given out, give it to the guy who didn't miss weight. But yeah, I think when you have someone like Yasuo Asane speaking out about it, things will change because he's the guy who can do that. You can't have the lower level, and you made a good point. Like, it's so rare for a fighter to like not accept the fight. That until the stars or somebody makes a big deal about it, then it'll start happening. Speaking of stars, William Knight is a guy that the UFC absolutely loves. He picked up another victory. His first victory in the UFC, his third victory under like any kind of UFC banner. He moves to 9-1 as he beats Alexa Khamar by unanimous decision. I usually like to talk first, but I'm gonna kick it to you. How do you feel about William Knight?
I don't know if I'm high on him, but I'm higher on him than I was at the beginning of the night. I said, and I stand by this, he looks like a mad scientist, like made a person out of bowling balls. He just looks like a stack of bowling balls. Yeah. And I picked against him, even though, I mean, I saw both of his appearances on Dana White's Contender Series. I've seen a couple of his CES fights. I saw his one loss in CFFC. I said, this guy will be fun for as long as he lasts. But I picked against him because anytime I see a fighter who usually his fights are over in the first round and he's got just that kind of muscle mass, I just have a tough time investing too hard in him. Like, I knew that Shane Carwin was going to die the first time he went, past the first round of a fight. And I felt that same way about Knight. So for Knight he was winning in the third round. He seemed fresh as a daisy. Like, I'm really impressed. It's not often that I see a fighter built like that who puts out that kind of work rate and doesn't just keel over after about 7 hard minutes of fighting. I was super impressed. Yeah. And I like this guy. I want him around. He's going to be a lot of fun for as far as he can go. Yeah,
he continues to improve, and I think one of the reasons why I constantly seem to pick against him, to the point where I've been attacked on Twitter by people in Connecticut, be like, what is your beef with William Knight? Like, I have no beef with this guy. In fact, I have interviewed him for UFC fights, contender fights, on the regional scene for after CS. I like him. He's like a very pleasant. He's got a massive big personality when he's at the fights. Just watching, he talks to everybody. He's big, huge smile. Like, he's a good person to be around. So I like William Knight. But I think my issue is because I've seen him grow on the regional scene. I don't know if his first impression has kind of I seen him and I was like, no, this is not a future UFC guy. And then I always think of that person because I expected Khamar to just outclass him, and it was not the case. Khamar really struggled with the strength of him. He really I was impressed with Knight's ability to win the scrambles, and especially the second and third round. And that's one that I thought Khamar would have, as the rounds went deeper, that he would have won those. And it was the opposite. And the other thing that you pointed out is that he didn't gas. Like, I keep talking about William Knight's gas tank, and he doesn't gas. I keep saying, looking at him, and like you said, and he hasn't gassed. So I got to just, when I look at my notes, I got to cross that off on him because it's not there. I keep putting something there that's not there. So William Knight, he does it again. Congratulations, man. Maybe he's much better than I thought. It was a good win for him.
Again, some of those scrambles, some of the positions that he instigated, I don't think that would fly against a better grappler at 205 than Alexa Khamar. Like the one where he basically took him in a cradle behind his back and just there are a lot of people that would have had Knight tapping out pretty quickly after that, but if it works, it works. And man, that kind of the arm lock that he had at the end of the second round, that was one of the more saved by the bell moments.
Oh yeah, I was sitting around with my friends and he was kind of setting up the key lock thing, and it was 5 seconds left, and I was like, that's just going to waste energy. He should punch him in the face right now and try to get a knockout with 10 seconds left. And as soon as the words like left my mouth, I couldn't pull him back in time. It was too late because as soon as it left my mouth, next one I saw Kamer's elbow going completely opposite direction than it should, and I was like, yeah, I thought he broke his arm. But yeah. Speaking of broken arms and injuries and all that, we had Juan Espino coming back after a 2-year layoff, taking on Jeff Hughes. Good call by both you and Jay. You both called first round. So I picked the unanimous decision. I thought it was going to be an ugly fight. It was not ugly. Espino looked as good as he ever has looked, but I really want to give you guys credit because you not only did you guys pick the submission, you guys picked submission by fat guy submission. This was a scarf hold, again, that kind of works on the heavier guys.
Oh, I picked it in the even greater detail than Jay did because I even said, well, yeah, Espino will find a way to get him down. He's got some nice trips and throws from the clinch, or he might just be strong enough to grab a body lock and just toss them both right over the side. That is exactly how he got him down. He didn't even trip him. He just kind of body locked him and just kind of laid down and landed on top of him. Yeah, it's exactly like I expected it to look. The only thing that wasn't like I expected it to look was Espino himself, because he actually looked in better physical shape than he did on Tough.
Yeah.
Like, he looked great. I mean, the guy's never going to have a 6-pack, but he had a 2-pack.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the note I wrote down that, I'm like, wow, he looks pretty good. Like, he looks like he's lost some weight. He's up there in age, so I don't think any of us is – well, it's heavyweight, so he's not too far up there in age, but still, he's up there in age. I don't think either one of us are ever going to pick him to be a UFC champion. But right now, like, he looks like a problem for a lot of guys in that division, especially if you don't have strong takedown defense. He looks like a top 20 guy in the division to me already right now.
I mean, I don't have a piece of paper in front of me, but dude, yeah, like I don't think that takedown game would work on some of the people in the top 15. I think he'd get stuck on the feet and pieced up.
Maybe.
But there are people he can beat, and he's 39. There are plenty of people up there that are as old as he is, or there are several guys over 40 in the top 15, and then you got plenty of guys like Miocic and Lewis that are 38 or about to turn 39.
Yeah.
Like, he's not old by the standards of a heavyweight at all.
Yeah, the perfect example is Alexei Oleinik. Look at the run he just went on. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that it was like he was 1 or 2 wins away from getting a title shot.
Yeah, and before him, Mark Hunt was the guy that was like 40 years old and on like 1 win away from a title shot.
He did fight for the title. Remember against Verdum with the interim title?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and Verdum hit him with that knee. Yeah. I was just thinking, like, a guy like Tai Tuivasa was ranked not that long ago, and to me, Espino runs right through Tai Tuivasa.
Oh yeah, it looks like this.
Yeah, that's what was my point. Like, he was ranked not that long ago. And speaking of guys that are ranked not that long ago, I don't think either one of these guys is going to be ranked anytime soon. But in the opening fight of the evening, Danilo Marquez won unanimous decision over Hagid Ibrahimov. Marquez is just the better grappler. Ibrahimov has is 0-4 in the UFC, but to me this is like the worst loss of all of them. This is the one that he probably should have won, and looked even worse than we've seen previously. I got nothing else to say about this fight.
Nope.
Okay. There you go. There you guys. We have covered all 11 fights from the top to the bottom. Want to just keep this momentum going and get right to the cut list. And
let's get right to the cut list. I'm here for it.
So Ibrahimov did not win his fight, but to me, he did win a spot on the cut list as he is now 0-4 in the UFC. Those look terrible. It's light heavyweight, so he could actually still get another fight. But I don't think he should. I think it's time for him to get cut.
Nope. I'm completely with you. He deserves to be cut. He's lost 4 in the UFC. None of them have been close, and he's really shown nothing during any of those fights that would make you hope that he's about to turn a corner. He's not UFC material right now.
Absolutely not. The other guy I have one more person for the cut list, and that was the fight right after Ibrahimov, and that is Jeff Hughes. Jeff Hughes is now 0-3 in the UFC with 1 no contest.
In a fight he was losing.
Yeah. Do you agree with that one too?
Absolutely. I was gonna mention him if you didn't. Like, Yeah, 0-3 with the no contest, and the no contest, he was losing to Todd Duffy until he poked him in the eye.
Yeah.
Get him out of here.
Do you have anybody else?
I do not.
Yeah, and not mention Todd Duffy, who didn't fight in like 400 years by the time he fought Jeff Hughes. So there you guys have it. The cut list, we believe Hades Ibrahimov and Jeff Hughes should be released from the UFC. Bulls and the Bears. What would you like to do first?
I like doing the Bears first. Get the bad news out of the way.
All right, you want to go first? Or you want me to go?
You go first.
Okay, I am gonna do. Okay, my number 3. I'm gonna put 2 groups together because we're only allowed to pick 3. I didn't say this, but I should say it. Bulls and the Bears is a stock market reference. Bulls is when the stock market is going up, it's a bull market. When it's going down, it's a bear market. So it's similar to some people do, like whose stock rose up, whose stock rose down. So these are people whose people or stories or whatever you want to, that stories that stock is going down. I put 2 groups together because they both went 0-2, and they're 2 groups that we don't get to put on this list often. The first, this is my number 3. I'm putting together. Russian MMA went 0-2 on the evening, and we don't say that often ever. So Russian MMA did get a little stock going down. And the other one that's fitting in my number 3 spot is Strong Style MMA, the team that's obviously most known for Stipe Miocic. They also went 0-2 with Jeff Hughes and Alexa Kamer both losing. So their stock is going down. My number 2 bear of the evening, so stock's going down, is Eric Albatazine. He was calling for Coach of the Year. He finally got matched head-to-head against Eugene Berriman, and his guy got smoked. So Coach, especially his cry for Coach of the Year of last year, looks a little worse right now. And my number 1 bear is Dominick Reyes. This is a guy that his last fight is the first time I thought anybody beat John Jones. To go from beating, in my opinion, the greatest fighter of all time, and most people at least did top 2 or 3 lists, to losing to Jan Blachowicz and get knocked out is extremely surprising. So Dominick Reyes' stock has absolutely plummeted. Do you have any nominees for the Bears?
Yeah, I'm just going to add 2 quick ones I agree with all of yours. My number 2 is going to be Kaitis Ibrahimov. How does your stock go down when you're already fighting for your job and you're 0-3 in the UFC? Well, your stock goes down when they find a guy for you that hasn't fought in 2 years. You go into the cage as almost a 2-1 favorite over him, and you still lose, and you just get whitewashed. Like, you don't offer anything. There was no moment of offense. There was no moment where I was like, oh, he could win this round, like, let alone finish the fight. Stock down.
Credit to you. I think you picked Marquez to win, right? Yep. So credit for you for doing that, because I did not.
And that was just me throwing darts at the board. I said, if I've got one unknown quantity and one quantity that I know to be bad, like, I'll at least gamble on the unknown quantity, was all I said. And then my number 1 bear, Paulo Costa. A lot of people are going to lose to Israel Adesanya before it's all said and done. There's no shame in losing to a guy that, you could already make a case that he's the second greatest middleweight in UFC history. I'm not making that case, but I'm saying, in and of itself, no shame in losing to Adesanya. But this is the first loss of Costa's career that veneer of invincibility is gone, and he'll never get it back. He is an extremely confident guy with what feels like a bit of a bully mindset. I'm not saying he's a bully in real life. The UFC booth was at pains to let us know what a nice and humble guy he is. But as far as how he deals with opponents, he's a mean mugging at you at the weigh-ins guy. And all that's gone. All that's gone the first time somebody, puts you away like that. So yeah, he's my number 1 bear of the week.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the mean mug, and I always think of like Ian Cutelaba. It's like, after you got knocked out silly, like, that doesn't work as much.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's go over to the Bulls. This is the guys whose stock are rising. I'll let you go first this time.
Give me Brandon Royval in my 3rd place spot. And in terms of just flat out eye-opening performance, he might have been higher. just, the stakes weren't quite as high as for some of these other folks, but he just flat out performed better than I expected. I expected him to have Kai Kara-France in a little bit of trouble just with his frenetic work rate, all offense all the time, but he just never let up, and Kai Kara-France never caught up to him. And so he went from a person of interest to, hey, maybe this guy does have contender potential and star potential in a division that needs both. So he is on my Bulls list. Next Bull, Ludovic Klein. It's a little bit marred, like we already said, because he missed weight so badly. But, hey, I'm not excusing it. He doesn't get a pass for it. But, there have been a lot of weight misses this year. You don't weight miss your way into being that much of a better fighter than a guy who, in Shane Young, he's absolutely a UFC material. He's a UFC roster guy. He's a decent featherweight, and Klein just embarrassed him. So that's number 2. And then number 1 can't be anyone but Jan Blachowicz. And I won't even reiterate it all because you said it, and then I ran it down for you. When he was losing to Pat Cummins, I don't think anybody would have pegged this guy as a future champion. And then I rattled off where he has been the underdog in 8 of his last 9 fights. Maybe those days are over. I don't know. It'll have to wait for his next fight. But for now, this man's stock is way, way, way up there.
Yeah, I agree with all of those. Both Bren Royval and Jan Blachowicz was on my list. The other one, obviously, is Israel Adesanya. I mean, without saying, there's nothing to say. The guy's 20-0. He looks absolutely amazing. He looks like he's going to go down as one of the all-time greats. I'm going to throw a bonus one in. The reason why I didn't make my list is because it would have only been seen in my area, so probably New England, maybe a little bit of New York, is during the ESPN prelims, ESPN Plus prelims, that's what I watched it on. They have the commercials, and then you always have, your regional commercials, or, and we've talked about this. It seems like ESPN Plus always has the same 5 commercials when they go to commercial break. Well, one of the commercials that I kept getting was a promotion from Mohegan Sun Casino. And the reason why it makes me so they had that, you see people gambling and obviously winning, and people drinking drinks by the pool, and a comedy show and nightlight dancing. But one thing that they kept going, and it was many times during the ESPN Plus, was highlights of Bellator. It was Bellator MMA. And I was like, Bellator MMA got themselves on an ESPN broadcast 30 times during every obviously wasn't that much, but every commercial break between rounds and fights. So I'm going to put it on the Bull list. Mohegan Sun and Bellator for sneaking that
That's
in.
Amazing.
Good job for you guys. Last one before we get out of here. Ben, give me your grade for this card.
A. One of the more enjoyable cards of the year for me. Just
wow.
I learned a lot. Had some thrilling moments. Neither of the championship fights was a fight of the year candidate, but they were a couple of the most impressive performances of the career of the year. So yeah, you're catching me in the heat of the moment. Maybe if we were recording tomorrow night, I wouldn't say it, but I'm giving it an A right now.
Wow. I'm going to give it a B, and the only reason why I definitely think it ended fantastic. The last 3 fights really lived up to itself, but there was a run of 4 straight decisions, and the Riddell to Silva fight was pretty fun, but the other ones, there was nothing spectacular.
Oh, I forgot about Sanchez Matthews. Give me an A-. Sorry.
Okay, there you go. So yeah, it started with Sanchez Matthews, ended with Vera and Eubanks. Other than maybe Riddell to Silva, none of those fights were barn burners. So I'm going to make that run is just the only thing that's keeping it from a B, but it definitely closed as an A+. The last 3 fights were fantastic. So there you guys have it. We have covered everything in depth of UFC 253 went down at Yas Eiling. The action will still continue next week. I think we have Irina Dana versus Holly Holm. Is that the card that's coming up next week?
Yep. Holm versus Aldana. And this one's rough.
Yeah. Ben, tell the people where they can find you on Twitter. Tell them what you're working on this week.
Well, as always, you can find me at SureDog.com, where I'm in just the features drop-down menu. I do daily This Day in MMA History for the historically inclined. On Tuesdays, I usually do an infographic showing the history of a UFC or Bellator belt. It will almost certainly be the light heavyweight belt, because I did the middleweight one last week leading into this weekend. And then you can find me right here on Sundays talking about the fight cards.
Yeah, while you were saying that, I was looking up next week card. Holy Christ, we got Jorgen de Castro versus Carlos Philippe in the co-main event. Oh my!
We have a former champion in Jermaine Durandamy going underneath that.
Yeah, I get it. They didn't want to put like two female fights. I mean, honestly, just go. I mean, I don't want to say gimmick because that's like the bad word, but go with that. But yeah, that heavyweight fight should not be the co-main event. But when you go through the card, you're like, nothing jumps out at me as like that should be the co-main event. Other than probably Durandamy versus Juliana Pena. You go with nostalgia and go with Carlos Condit versus Courtney. I don't know. But Carlos Condit, oh my God, Carlos Condit he's on the prelims under DeQuan Townsend and Tom Breeze fights. Anyways, we're gonna get out of here, guys. You can follow me at Keith Shillan MMA. My last name Shillan is spelled Shillan. We'll be back next week. We locked in all the usual shows on the Sure Dog Radio Network and the Loudmouth MMA podcast. See you next time.